So there's currently a gold farm in the war within that can make you upwards of 100,000 gold an hour completely solo, and this is incredibly easy and you don't really need any amount of high tier gear. And the main gold maker from this farm is a crafting material, so that means it's going to be sold region wide. So you're going to be getting a ton of gold and it's going to be selling almost instantly. Now, this is going to revolve around farming profaned tinderboxes from a specific delve. And you may have heard about this farm before, but there's a bunch of information that most people don't know about that can make this farm much more efficient. And this has a completely different way to farm these from this specific delve. So we have a good amount of information to go over when it comes to this specific farm. Now, profane tinderboxes are a crafting material that are currently going for around 9,000 gold, at least on US realms. So anytime you get one of these, that's a large chunk of gold, and they've even gone up slightly in prices because the disturbed earth and wax farm, which is where most people were getting these before, have been pretty heavily nerfed. So a lot of people aren't getting these anymore. So I think they're either going to stay the same price or maybe even go up in price even more. Now, the delve we're going to be farming these in is the Nightfall Sanctum in Hollowfall. Now, you can get these in the ending chest of pretty much every delve, but Nightfall Sanctum is just the absolute best delve to farm these in, no matter which of the two farming methods you're doing. Now, the first method of farming this is very simple. You're just going to go into the tier 1 version of this delve, and you're just going to complete it as quickly as possible because the two chests at the end have a chance to give you profaned tinderboxes. Both of those boxes can drop them. Now, they're not the highest drop chance, but when you can clear these delves in only a couple minutes, you start to add up the chances to be able to get these. And you only need to get a handful of these to make just a ridiculous amount of gold. Now, keep in mind, the majority of the delves, including Nightfall Sanctum, have multiple versions of the delve. So every day you go back, the delve will be different. I think Nightfall Sanctum has 3 different versions, and each different version can be more or less efficient, depending on if you're doing it solo or with a group. Now, with a group, you can generally do every version of these quicker. I want to keep this video a bit more focused on being a solo farm, but if you can get a group, you can generally do these more quickly, especially depending on which version of the delve it is that day. One of them is really bad for solos because you have to clear out the enemies, and there are these void bubbles where then you have to place a bunch of items around them, and as you progress throughout the delve, every one of those void bubbles takes more of these items you have to place around them while also having to defeat enemies. So when you're doing that one solo, it's going to be much slower, but if you get with a group, the tank can just go through, pull all of the enemies, and every other person in the group can just go take a separate orb and do it much more quickly. That way you could get those done in like 2 minutes. Then another version of the delve is much better for solo players because you just have to destroy these 11 void infused fires. You just kill a few enemies around them, you channel like 1 second on it, it destroys it, that'll take you to the boss at the end. That version is much better for solos. Now, this is just the first and more simple way to farm this. Now, the second method is a lot more interesting, and it's something that a lot of people don't even know exists. And this has to do with Brann and gathering the different gathering nodes within delves. So if you've been doing delves, you'll have realized if you get close enough to any of the herbalism nodes, the mining nodes, or the fishing holes, the Brann will go over and start to gather from them and throw you some materials. But what you probably didn't know is that in a lot of the delves, anytime Brann goes and gathers something, he has a chance to also give you a rare material. Now, some of the delves this doesn't happen in, and then with most of the delves that it does happen in, the rare material he can give you isn't really worth a bunch. It's usually worth like 50 gold. But in Nightfall Sanctum, anytime Brann gathers from an herbalism node, a mining node, or a fishing hole, he can randomly give you a profane tinderbox. And this seems to be the only delve that this can be done in, or at least the only delve that I've been able to get profane tinderboxes from Brann gathering these. And it's also pretty interesting because if you go in this delve with the character that say has herbalism and mining, you can't get profane tinderboxes from gathering. Only Brann can. So as you may have realized, going through these and having Brann gather every single gatherable you can find can pretty heavily increase the chance of you finding profane tinderboxes. And in the Nightfall Sanctum, there can be 3 gatherables spawn anytime you go in there. And this can consist of any mixture of herbalism nodes, mining nodes, and fishing holes. Now, since fishing is a secondary profession, anybody can track those to make them much more easy to find. But to track herbalism or mining nodes, you'll need to have those professions. So if you have a character with both of those professions, it'll be easier to do this farm with that character because you'll know exactly where all 3 of those gatherables are anytime you go in the delve. So there's 2 different ways you can farm this delve when you're trying to also get all of the gathering nodes. The first one is obviously the much more simple one. You just complete the delve normally, but as you come across any of the gatherables, you just go over to them, you have Brann gather them, and that just gives you additional chances to find these nodes. Now this should also be more efficient with a group because when you're in a group, whenever Brann gathers one of these gatherables, he throws materials to everybody. It doesn't like reduce the materials he's giving out when you're in a group. So what you can do in a group is you can have 4 of the people go complete the delve while the leader of the group, so the person that will have Brann following them, goes around and gets the 3 gatherables. That would actually be pretty fast with a group, but you can also just do this solo and it'll still be very good as a solo farm. Now the third method of farming this is a bit different because you're not going to be completing the delve. All you're really going to be doing in this third method is going in there, having Brann gather the 3 gatherables, then you're going to leave the delve. Because if you don't know, right clicking on your portrait, you can leave delve from anywhere if you're not in combat. So you can very easily get all 3 gatherables super quickly without having to pretty much kill anything. Leave the delve by right clicking on your portrait. Then all you need to do is re-enter the delve. You don't even have to reset the delve or anything because you are the only one in there. It'll automatically reset when you try to enter again. And what's super nice about delves is they're not instances. So they don't have an instance cap like normal dungeons or raids would. So you can farm this infinitely. So you could go in there, get all the gatherables in under a minute, leave the delve, and then go back in. And this would technically be the most efficient way if the gatherables have the same chance to give you the profane tinderboxes as the chests at the end do. Now I don't have information on if that's the case. They do seem to be a pretty similar drop rate. The gatherables may be slightly lower, but if you can go in there and get all their gatherables much more quickly than you could complete the delves, this would generally be much more efficient than completing the delve for the chests at the end. And there does also seem to be a glitch that could potentially make this farm even more efficient, but I want to gather more information on that before I release it in a video, so keep an eye out for that as well. So going through all of that information, I think the most efficient way to go about farming these profane tinderboxes in the Nightfall Sanctum is to actually just go for the 3 gatherables. Because not only can these 3 gatherables just be very close to the start of the delve, but it's just generally much faster, especially as a solo farm. Because keep in mind, I'm talking about all of this as it pertains to being a solo farm. Like I mentioned, if you have a group to do this in, a group can probably make it more efficient to have 4 people complete the delve while 1 person goes around and gets all of the gatherables with Brann. But as a solo player, I think it's going to be best to go in here and just search for the 3 gatherables. And keep in mind, as you'll see in the footage, when you get in the delve, just jump off the ledge in front of you. That'll get you to the center part of the delve much more quickly, where a lot of the gatherables are usually focused around. But no matter which way you go about farming these, you'll be able to get a ridiculous amount of gold. Like I mentioned, upwards of 100,000 gold an hour, because if you get a little bit lucky, you can get 100,000 gold an hour just from these profane tinderboxes. You'll also be getting a bunch of other materials because you'll obviously be gathering all of these nodes the whole time, or looting the chests at the end of the delve, or looting any of the enemies you kill, which can give us some grays and extra gold. So you'll usually be making 100,000 gold or more per hour as a solo farmer. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.